New evidence just got exposed about Horner's shocking Red Bull exit, and it changes everything. If you want to know the information that will make you understand the real reason why Horner is being fired, this video is for you. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Christian Horner's stunning expulsion from Red Bull Racing didn't simply mark the end of an era, it detonated an emotional and political earthquake throughout the entire Formula One landscape, sending tremors through every paddock, every executive suite, every fan base, and every rival garage from Monaco to Suzuka. For years, the name Horner had become synonymous with strategic dominance, operational precision, and an iron-fisted grip on one of the most powerful, relentless, and resource-rich racing dynasties in the history of motorsport. His influence wasn't just respected, it was feared, admired, loathed, and begrudgingly envied by both allies and adversaries alike. But this wasn't some reckless boardroom whim or a late-night crisis call. No, this was the climax of an intricately orchestrated internal mutiny, a slow-burning insurgency that had been simmering behind polished smiles and tight-lipped interviews, long before it exploded in broad daylight. Beneath the glitz, beneath the podium champagne and headlines of supremacy, a dark secret of war had been festering within the very bones of Red Bull's upper echelons. A vicious, almost Shakespearean battle full of strategic betrayals, high-stakes maneuvering, carefully calculated leaks, and power-hungry factions working overtime to outplay, outmaneuver, and eventually oust the man who was once untouchable. This wasn't just the removal of a team principal. It was the symbolic assassination of a monarch. It was a message, raw, brutal, and unmistakable, that no throne is ever safe, not even for the architect of one of the most formidable empires Formula One has ever witnessed. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. And perhaps what makes this entire narrative so bone-chillingly compelling is the merciless way it all unfolded. There were no golden farewells, no nostalgic tributes, no slow ceremonial exit worthy of the accolades and championships Horner had accrued. Not a single press conference to reflect on his contributions. No warning. No transition period. Just a clinical, cold-blooded ejection, a ruthlessly timed guillotine drop that severed ties with military efficiency. One day he was there, the next he was gone, as though a line had been crossed so profoundly that even his most loyal allies were forced to step back, or worse, betray him for survival. The silence was deafening. The void, instant. The damage, irreversible. At the heart of this dramatic upheaval lies a tectonic shift in the ownership dynamics that had once served as Horner's impenetrable shield. For years, his power base wasn't just his record on the track, it was deeply rooted in the unwavering backing of Kalerm Uvidhia, the elusive Thai billionaire who inherited the largest controlling interest in the Red Bull empire after the passing of his legendary father Chalio. As long as Kalerm held the golden 51%, a majority that rendered the Austrian stakeholders mere spectators when it came to final decisions, Horner was insulated from any internal rebellion. It didn't matter how loudly the whispers grew, or how intensely the factions surrounding Helmut Marko and the Verstappen inner circle plotted to dethrone him. The numbers were always in Horner's favor. Until they weren't. Because something shifted. Subtly at first, then violently. The once impregnable alliance between Kalerm and Horner began to fracture, weakened by conflicting visions, emerging priorities, and according to insiders, a series of trust-eroding incidents that flipped the loyalty equation inside Red Bull's inner sanctum. Suddenly, Horner wasn't the protected chess master. He was the exposed king, and every pawn, rook, and bishop on the board began closing in. And what followed wasn't just a fall from grace. It was a strategic decapitation executed with clinical precision. A maneuver so well hidden, so thoroughly calculated, that even those closest to the paddock corridors were left stunned, grasping for answers, theories, and clues. The ripple effect of this seismic collapse cannot be overstated. Without Horner's political gravity anchoring the operation, every relationship inside Red Bull now hangs in fragile suspension. Engineers who once thrived under his leadership suddenly face a power vacuum. Longtime allies must now choose new sides. Max Verstappen's camp, long rumored to be at odds with Horner over control, influence, and internal direction, may finally feel emboldened to reshape the team's future in their own image. And Helmut Marko, the enigmatic advisor whose role has always straddled the line between oracle and operator, could either rise as the new kingmaker or become the next target in this ongoing chess match of high-speed corporate warfare. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Ultimately, this isn't just about the removal of a figurehead. It's about identity. Legacy. The soul of a racing team that has operated more like a private kingdom than a conventional organization. With Horner exiled, The castle gates are wide open, and the question on everyone's lips isn't just what happened, but what happens next. Will Red Bull fragment into warring factions, driven by conflicting visions and egos? Will Verstappen consolidate power and morph into a driver-manager hybrid, influencing not just race strategy but corporate decisions? Will a new figure rise from the shadows, armed with a mandate to preserve the empire, or burn it down to rebuild it in a new image? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain: Formula One will never be the same again. Not after this. Not after the fall of Christian Horner. In a behind-the-scenes maneuver that reshaped the entire foundation of the company, Calum, without fanfare and far from the media spotlight, discreetly redirected his modest yet symbolically significant 2% shareholding into a trust fund headquartered in Geneva. This action, seemingly small on the surface, sent seismic ripples through the organization. It marked the end of Thai direct influence in the corporate structure and seamlessly transferred the balance of power to the Austrian faction. Individuals who had been waiting, calculating, and quietly organizing their next strategic step. With the ink barely dry on the trust transfer, the Austrian leadership seized the moment. They moved with brutal efficiency and unflinching precision. Christian Horner, once considered untouchable within the team's hierarchy, was swiftly and unceremoniously dismissed. There were no grand announcements, no emotionally charged press conferences, no vague platitudes about mutual partings, just silence. His removal was as sudden as it was definitive. One day he was there, the next, his office sat vacant. To assume that Max Verstappen's close allies were merely passive observers in this unfolding drama would be a gross oversimplification. While there's no concrete evidence tying Max or his entourage directly to the execution of Horner's ousting, their fingerprints are all over the political buildup. Jos Verstappen, Max's outspoken and often confrontational father, had been dropping verbal grenades in interviews for months, openly challenging Horner's leadership and warning of internal decay if he remained at the helm. His words, once dismissed as emotional outbursts, now feel prophetic. The foundations of Red Bull racing, long considered unshakable, have begun to fracture. Adrian Newey, the team's cerebral engineering mastermind whose innovations helped define an era, is stepping away. Meanwhile, technical director Pierre Watch is rumored to be frustrated and increasingly disillusioned. Once private whispers of discord among senior staff have transformed into persistent and undeniable rumblings of a civil war brewing within the walls of Milton Keynes. The scandal surrounding Horner, centered on alleged inappropriate behavior, conveniently served as the catalyst for his abrupt departure, yet questions remain. Was misconduct the true reason for his expulsion, or simply the lever that allowed the Austrians to execute a long-awaited power shift? Reports emerged that several female staff members had grown uncomfortable enough to bypass internal human resources altogether, choosing instead to voice their concerns directly to Red Bull's central leadership in Austria. That detail alone suggests either an overwhelming distrust of internal handling or a calculated decision to elevate the stakes. In response, the company didn't hesitate. They bypassed corporate discretion, opted for transparency, and promptly enlisted an independent third-party investigation to address the allegations. An aggressive move that signaled two possibilities: either the charges carried enough weight to merit such action, or the Austrian leadership finally had the justification they'd been craving. Either way, Horner's fate was sealed the moment that investigation was announced. It wasn't just about right and wrong anymore, it was about power, optics, and control. In the weeks that followed, what had started as a slow erosion of authority evolved into a full-scale upheaval. Red Bull Racing, once the embodiment of performance, innovation, and team cohesion, now finds itself mired in uncertainty, with battle lines quietly being drawn between loyalty to the old guard and allegiance to the emerging regime. And amid all this turmoil, the Verstappen camp grows stronger, more influential, and increasingly untouchable. They didn't fire the first shot, but they may be the ones who benefit the most when the dust finally settles. Even the unshakable Bernie Ecclestone, a man who for years stood shoulder to shoulder with Christian Horner as one of his most trusted allies, one of his closest behind-the-scenes counselors, could barely process the shock. Caught off guard, Bernie's reaction was anything but subtle. In a rare moment of candidness, he let the world know exactly how he felt, expressing a disbelief so profound it echoed across the paddock and beyond. "It's like he committed a murder," Ecclestone exclaimed with a kind of raw, unfiltered honesty that only someone of his stature can afford. What stunned him most wasn't just the act itself. It was the sudden, brutal, and cold-blooded fashion in which Horner was removed from power, almost as if years of loyalty, vision, and accomplishments had been wiped clean from memory in a single ruthless stroke. Ecclestone, who had spoken with Horner just the day before the hammer came down, insisted that there hadn't been the slightest hint of impending doom. Their exchange had been entirely ordinary, utterly devoid of tension or foreboding. That revelation alone injects a deeply human and emotional layer into what many assumed was just another ruthless boardroom maneuver. Here was a man who had devoted over 20 years, 2 full decades, to transforming a team from energetic newcomers into the most dominant force in modern Formula One history, only to be discarded with an almost clinical detachment, allegedly without even a moment of warning or farewell. If the alleged improprieties and private messages linked to Horner truly served as the final nail in the coffin, then the question of timing becomes even more intriguing, more complex, more layered. Why did the axe fall now, after all this time? The controversial and much publicized WhatsApp controversy that had gripped the media cycle in early 2024 had gradually faded into the background, overtaken by on-track battles and championship narratives. Horner had, against the odds, survived the media storm, held firm under pressure, and managed to keep his position intact. More importantly, Red Bull's performance on the circuit remained virtually unaffected. If anything, it flourished. There was no visible sign of internal collapse. And yet, this explosive decision to terminate him reignites suspicions that the scandal had never truly died. It had merely been biding its time, waiting in the shadows, lying dormant like a virus only to be reactivated at the precise moment when the internal balance of power shifted. As allies fell, as rival factions grew stronger, the moment to strike presented itself, and the long-held scandal was suddenly repurposed as a political weapon, unleashed at a time when Horner's support had eroded beyond salvation. Even now, in the aftermath of the decision, the full weight of its consequences remains staggering and hard to comprehend. This was not just a simple reshuffling of corporate leadership. It was not merely a changing of names on office doors or an update to the team website. It was a seismic event, one that effectively dismantles an entire identity that had been crafted and cultivated over 2 relentless decades of competition, innovation, and dominance. Christian Horner wasn't just a team principal in the traditional sense, he had become the embodiment of Red Bull racing itself. His voice was the one the media turned to. His face became synonymous with the team's rise from obscurity to global supremacy. His decisions shaped the trajectory of careers, championships, and the very structure of the modern F1 paddock. To remove him now, so abruptly and with such finality, is to attempt to rewrite the DNA of the team. It is to rip out its central nervous system and expect the body to keep moving. Into this emotional and strategic vacuum steps Laurent Mekies, a figure with deep experience and an impressive resume forged at iconic institutions like Ferrari and AlphaTauri. Mekies may bring a calm demeanor and technical acumen, but what he inherits is not merely a team, it's a pressure cooker. On paper, Red Bull remains a title-contending powerhouse, a juggernaut engineered to win. But beneath the glossy exterior lies a squad fraying at the edges, riddled with political tensions, loyalty fractures, and an identity crisis sparked by the departure of its architect. Mekies is not walking into a neatly wrapped operation. He's stepping onto a minefield, where every move will be scrutinized, every result judged against the legacy of his predecessor. And that legacy, Horner's legacy, is not just about trophies or headlines. It's about creating an empire from scratch, defying expectations, managing volatile egos, outwitting rivals, and always staying one step ahead. That's the ghost Mekies will have to confront, an invisible but overwhelming presence that will haunt every decision, every race, every post-race debrief. As the paddock reels from the shockwaves, one truth becomes unavoidable: Red Bull racing is no longer the same. The castle still stands, but its king has been overthrown. And whether the new regime can survive the storm, or whether the entire empire begins to unravel from within, remains the most compelling, most unpredictable, and most emotionally charged subplot in Formula One today. There can be absolutely no doubt, not even the faintest shred of uncertainty, that Christian Horner walks away from this seismic split with an eye-watering financial safety net, one so generous and expansive it would make even the most seasoned executives raise an eyebrow. Despite the bombshell nature of his departure, the legalities of his long-standing agreement with Red Bull remain fully intact. With well over half a decade still left on the books, Red Bull finds itself contractually bound to disburse a jaw-dropping sum that is expected to exceed a staggering £50 million. This is no ordinary exit package. It is the kind of golden parachute that most in the paddock could only fantasize about. It is opulent, monumental, and undeniably excessive. And yet, while the financial component is secure and abundant, it does nothing to mend the gaping hole left in the wake of his shattered legacy. Because legacy, true, lasting, intangible legacy, is something that no direct deposit, no severance payout, no multi-million-pound compensation clause can buy back. It's something Horner watched crumble overnight, disintegrating in real time without ceremony, without warning, without even the dignity of a final act. His reputation, once bulletproof and commanding, now dangles perilously by the slimmest of threads, exposed and vulnerable, teetering on the brink of irrelevance. And yet, against all odds and despite the collapse of everything he built within Red Bull's inner sanctum, Horner's story is far from over. In fact, it's only entering a new chapter, one marked not by retreat, but by relentless speculation and renewed intrigue. He remains, for all his baggage, one of the sharpest minds in the Formula One universe. And several teams, perhaps desperate for direction, hungry for transformation, or simply seduced by the allure of a proven winner, are already circling like sharks sensing opportunity in troubled waters. Among those linked most heavily to Horner's next move, Alpine stands out as a frontrunner. The Enstone-based squad has been languishing in mediocrity for far too long, mired in inconsistency and devoid of meaningful progress. But with a new power unit partnership with Mercedes looming on the 2026 horizon, sweeping organizational changes are not just likely, they're practically inevitable. And who better to helm a complete philosophical overhaul than a man who turned Red Bull from a midfield experiment into a dynastic powerhouse? Horner's tactical brilliance, his ruthless pursuit of excellence, and his deep understanding of the political and performance-oriented nuances of the sport could be exactly what Alpine needs to shed its underdog status and emerge as a true frontrunner once more. But Alpine is hardly the only door that may swing open. Across the grid, eyes are locked on Maranello, where Ferrari's leadership structure is wobbling under the weight of unmet expectations and internal discontent. Team principal Frédéric Vasseur has, to this point, struggled to convert bold rhetoric into tangible, on-track results. Promises have been made, grand, sweeping promises, but the prancing horse has yet to gallop back to consistent podium contention. In the boardrooms above, figures like CEO Benedetto Vigna and Chairman John Elkann are growing increasingly impatient, watching yet another year slip away without championship contention. Their tolerance for stagnation is thinning rapidly, and whispers of a radical shakeup are beginning to echo through Ferrari's corridors. Enter Horner, the wild card, the disruptor, the man capable of bringing not just change but a winning culture forged through fire. It would be a polarizing decision, one that could split the tifosi and provoke backlash, but it might also be the very jolt Ferrari needs. Installing Horner at the helm would send a shockwave through the sport, a signal that the Scuderia is no longer content with incremental improvement. It would be a bold, headline-grabbing maneuver, filled with risk but rich with the potential for redemption, revival, and renaissance. What comes next for Christian Horner is far from certain. But what is certain is this: the paddock has not seen the last of him. Not by a long shot. Speculation is running wild as fans around the world try to piece together a puzzle shrouded in ambiguity, drama, and unanswered questions. Did Christian Horner become the unfortunate casualty of internal warfare brewing behind the glossy corporate curtain? Was he undermined by those closest to him, backstabbed in a power play that had been simmering for months, or even years, waiting for the perfect moment to erupt? Or are we witnessing the consequences of action so controversial, so incompatible with the values of a world-leading Formula One team, that Red Bull's leadership simply had no other alternative but to make a seismic and painful decision? The reality may not be as black and white as either scenario suggests. It likely exists in that confusing, chaotic, and emotionally charged gray zone where calculated boardroom politics collide with personal vendettas, fragile egos, and the relentless, crushing demand to stay ahead in the cutthroat battleground of elite motorsport. Beneath the surface of glossy press releases and calm public statements lies a story far more intense, one charged with betrayal, ambition, secrecy, and perhaps even manipulation. There's a storm of tension between what's said publicly and what's whispered in private conversations across the paddock. Whispers of sabotage, accusations of betrayal, and silent power grabs are now echoing louder than any engine on the grid. Was Horner simply outplayed in a brutal chess match where every move was designed to expose his flaws and erode his authority? Was the scandal the catalyst, or the excuse, that someone had been waiting for to pull the rug out from under one of the longest-standing team principals in modern F1? Behind the scenes, it seems the environment at Red Bull had grown increasingly volatile, an ecosystem where influence is currency and survival requires both cunning and compliance. And now, with Horner's once dominant figure cast into uncertainty, fans are left stunned, grappling with the fall of a man whose name was once synonymous with Red Bull's meteoric rise. The paddock, always buzzing with rumors, now feels like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Questions swirl about what happens next. Will Horner resurface elsewhere, perhaps with a rival team looking to gain a strategic advantage from his deep knowledge and experience? Will he become a consultant in the shadows, orchestrating moves from behind the curtain? Or has his time in Formula One ended with a spectacular implosion, leaving only speculation and a complicated legacy behind? Whatever the next page of his career might hold, there is no denying the deep imprint Horner has left on the sport. He wasn't just a manager, he was a master strategist, a polarizing figure, a relentless competitor who lived and breathed every lap, every deal, and every headline. His rise was filled with accolades, championships, and respect, but his fall, sudden and dramatic, has shaken the very foundations of Red Bull racing and forced the entire F1 world to reconsider what loyalty, leadership, and legacy truly mean in a business where fortunes can shift in milliseconds. In a sport that thrives on speed, precision, and dominance, Horner's dramatic downfall sends a chilling message. No position is too secure, no name too legendary, and no tenure too long to be swept aside when the balance of power tips. The once unshakable image of Red Bull's leadership has fractured under the weight of controversy, and while the dust hasn't yet settled, the tremors from this moment will be felt far beyond Milton Keynes. Fans, rivals, and insiders alike will be watching every move, every statement, every silence, searching for answers in the wreckage of what once was a seemingly untouchable reign. Share with us what you genuinely believe ignited the dramatic unraveling of this high-stakes situation. Was Christian Horner the true mastermind behind the scenes, pulling strings with calculated precision and ultimately orchestrating his own downfall? Or was he merely another pawn, an expendable figure caught in a sprawling web of power struggles, ego battles, and ruthless internal agendas, all playing out in the shadowy corridors of one of the most powerful organizations in Formula One? Could this have been a clash of titans behind closed doors? A collision of ambitions far greater than we imagined, where Horner became the scapegoat to protect something, or someone, even bigger? We want to hear your take. Don't hold back. Let your theory unfold in the comments below. Do you think Horner was sacrificed to preserve the facade of unity? Was this an inside job masked as a collapse, designed to shift the balance of influence inside Red Bull Racing and its parent structure? Could this be the tip of the iceberg, with more dramatic revelations on the way that might completely alter the trajectory of the team, its leadership, and maybe even the careers of its top drivers? Your voice matters. The community is watching, the debate is burning, and your comment might just be the spark that ignites the next wave of discussion. So take a second, drop your opinion, no matter how wild or bold, and let the world know where you stand. And if you're hungry to dig deeper into the chaos that followed and the uncertain road ahead, don't even think about missing what's coming next. The next video is already waiting, loaded with shocking insights, exclusive analysis, and all the behind-the-scenes turbulence that could shake Red Bull to its core. Click it now, and don't look away. This story is far from over.